Didn't step back. Yes, I said carefully. He nodded once, like he had just confirmed something important. I was told I might find you out here today. The world didn't tilt or spin. It just went very still. Told by who? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He held my gaze for a second too long, then said it, simple and clean, like it didn't carry the weight it actually did. Your son. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. Daniel had called me the night before, his voice soft, telling me to rest, telling me he'd come by in a few days once things settled down. There had been nothing unusual about it. Nothing that would connect him to a man standing on the side of a road with a flat tire. That doesn't make any sense, I said, more to myself than to him. The man tilted his head slightly, studying me, as if measuring how much I could handle. He hired me, he said. And just like that, the silence I had been carrying since the funeral cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but enough for something cold and deliberate to start taking its place. I did not argue with him. I did not ask another question. I simply nodded once, thanked him for fixing the tire as if that had been the only reason we had crossed paths, and walked back to my car with the same measured steps I had used at the cemetery earlier that morning. My hands did not shake until I closed the door and locked it. Then they trembled just enough for me to notice. I sat there for a moment, staring at the road ahead, the engine still off, the silence inside the car thick and unfamiliar. Daniel hired me. The sentence repeated itself in my mind, not loudly, not urgently, but with a steady persistence that made it impossible to ignore. My son had never been careless with his words. He was a thoughtful boy, even as a man. He chose what he said carefully, and more importantly, what he did not say. The night before, when he called, there had been pauses. I remembered them now. Small ones. Easy to dismiss at the time. But now they felt different. Intentional. I started the car and pulled back onto the road, driving slower than usual, as if giving myself more time would somehow change what I had just heard. The house greeted me the same way it had every day for the past week. Quiet. Still. Too large for one person. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, looking at the 2 coffee mugs still sitting in the sink from the morning before my husband passed. I had not moved them. I had not been ready. Now, for the first time, they looked less like a memory and more like evidence of a life that had already been cleared out without my permission. I poured myself a glass of water, took a sip, and set it down untouched. Something was shifting, not outside, but inside me. The kind of shift that does not come with tears or raised voices, but with a quiet awareness that something you trusted has changed shape entirely. Around 3 in the afternoon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I did not rush to the window. I did not need to. I already knew it was Daniel. He had always driven too carefully, even as a teenager. The front door opened without a knock, just like it always had, and his voice carried into the kitchen. "Mom," he called, softer than usual, as if grief had made him cautious. I turned slowly, wiping my hands on a dish towel I had not been using. He stepped into the doorway, followed closely by Rebecca, her posture straight, her expression composed in that way she had perfected over the years. She gave me a small smile, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. "We wanted to check on you," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. I nodded, studying them both in a way I had never allowed myself to before. Daniel looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from loss. It was something else, something heavier, avoidant. He did not meet my eyes for more than a second at a time. Rebecca, on the other hand, held my gaze just long enough to appear sincere, then glanced away as if she had already decided what this visit was meant to accomplish. "You should not be alone right now," Daniel said, stepping further into the room. "We have been talking about what is best for you." The words settled in the space between us, familiar in tone, but different in weight. I folded the dish towel carefully and placed it on the counter, buying myself a moment. "That is kind of you," I said evenly. "What exactly have you been talking about?" Rebecca stepped in slightly before Daniel could answer, her voice gentle but firm. "Just options," she said. "Ways to make things easier. This house is a lot to manage, especially now." I nodded again, as if considering it, though my attention had already shifted elsewhere. To the pauses in Daniel's speech. To the way Rebecca answered for him. To the quiet certainty that whatever they had been planning had not started after the funeral. It had started long before. And now, for the first time, I was beginning to see it clearly. I did not sit down when they did. I stayed by the counter, my hands resting lightly on the edge, as if I needed something solid to hold on to while everything else quietly rearranged itself. Rebecca moved first, pulling out a chair and smoothing her skirt before sitting, her movements careful and deliberate, like someone stepping into a role she had rehearsed many times. Daniel followed, slower, his eyes scanning the room in a way that told me he was not really seeing it. He used to notice everything in this house. The small things. The way the curtains changed with the seasons. The way his father liked his chair angled toward the window. Now he sat at the table like a visitor. "We have been thinking," Rebecca began again, folding her hands neatly in front of her, "that it might be time to make some adjustments." I watched her as she spoke, not the words, but the rhythm. Smooth. Controlled. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. She had already decided how this conversation would go. "Adjustments," I repeated, letting the words settle between us. Daniel cleared his throat, finally looking at me for a fraction longer than before. "Mom, it is just, this house is a lot. Maintenance, taxes, everything. You should not have to deal with all of that alone." I nodded slowly, as if I had not already managed it for decades. "And what do you suggest?" I asked. There was a brief pause, and in that pause, I saw it. Daniel glanced at Rebecca, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to understand who had been guiding this conversation long before they walked through my door. "There are some really nice communities," Rebecca said, picking up the thread seamlessly. "Places where you would have support, activities, people your age. It would be a better environment for you." A better environment. I let the phrase sit in my mind, turning it over quietly. Not a suggestion, a direction. "And the house?" I asked, my voice steady, almost curious. Daniel shifted in his chair, his hands clasping and unclasping once before settling. "We could take care of it," he said. "Make sure it is used properly. It has a lot of value, Mom. It should not just sit here. Used properly." The words echoed in the same calm tone the stranger had used earlier that day. Nothing dramatic, nothing raised, just statements presented as if they were already agreed upon. I walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and rinsed a glass that was already clean. The sound of running water filled the silence, giving me a moment to think without being watched too closely. "That is generous," I said after a moment, turning the water off and setting the glass down carefully. "You have clearly put a lot of thought into this." Rebecca smiled again, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. "We just want what is best for you." I dried my hands slowly, each movement measured, deliberate. My husband used to say that people reveal themselves in what they assume you will not question. I had not understood that fully until now. "Of course," I said softly. "And when did you start thinking about this?" The question was simple, neutral, but it landed differently. Daniel's gaze dropped immediately to the table. Rebecca held her smile for a second too long before answering. "It has been on our minds for a while," she said. "For a while? Not after the funeral. Not after the loss. Before. The realization did not come like a shock. It settled, quiet and certain, like a piece of a puzzle finally fitting into place." I nodded once, as if that answer satisfied me. "I see," I said, and for the first time since they arrived, I allowed myself to look directly at my son, not as the boy I had raised, but as the man sitting across from me now, avoiding my eyes, letting someone